Hi everyone, my name is Busari Abiodun. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I will be discussing about manufacturing account, and this is the first part of the video where I will be discussing everything you need to know about manufacturing account. The second part of the video is going to be a complete question on manufacturing account and the solution to that question. So let's get started. Manufacturing account. Before we dive into what manufacturing account is, what is manufacturing itself? Manufacturing means transformation of raw materials into finished products. So an account that is prepared to know the cost of producing this product is what you call manufacturing account. So, and the principal purpose of preparing manufacturing account is for the company to determine whether to manufacture their products or to buy the product. That is, if it will be economical, that is, if the cost of production will be less than cost of buying the product, the company will choose to manufacture the product themselves. But if the cost of production will be higher than the cost of buying the product, that means the company will shut down the manufacturing process and go for the purchase of the product. So, like I said, so manufacturing accounts is just an extension of trading account. So, what are the manufacturing costs? That is, what are the costs in expenses involved in manufacturing process? So, this refers to the various costs involved in the production of or manufacturing of goods, and this cost can be classified into three. The first one is prime cost, we have overhead cost, and we have work in progress. I will be taking them one after the other. What is prime cost? If you are talking about prime cost, these are expenses that can be directly linked to the goods being produced. That is, these expenses we are talking about. So without the expenses, the manufacturing of the goods cannot be made possible. So these expenses includes, we have direct materials, direct labor, and direct expenses. I will take them each one after the other. If you are talking about direct materials, we are talking about materials that are used in producing the goods. So this refers to the cost of acquiring raw materials used for production of goods. So examples of these materials, let's take for example in the production of bread. If you are talking about direct materials, it will include cost of flour, sugar, baking powder, butter, and every other materials that are required in the production of bread. We call them direct materials. So if you are talking about direct labor, so this refers to the wages and salaries of workers who are directly involved in the manufacturing process. So these workers we are talking about, without them, manufacturing of goods cannot be made possible. So for example, in the production of bread, so the wages and salaries of worker that is in charge of mixing the materials, that is mixing sugar, flour, everything together, that type of labor is a direct labor. So it's the kind of labor we are talking about in the manufacturing of goods. So like the oven operator is also a direct material. This is also a direct labor in the manufacturing process. So their absence in the line of production will halt the activities of the production process. So if you are not talking about direct expenses, you are talking about all those expenses that can be directly related to the goods. This is not very common among the manufacturing companies. So it is mostly found when it comes to extractive industries, that is digging of raw materials. So for example now, so a good example of direct expenses is royalty. If you are talking about royalty, that is the amount being paid on every extraction being made on natural resources. Let's say for example, maybe like gold, diamond. If these items are found on a land, so what is being paid to the landowner, they don't usually rent those land or sell them out. The landowner used to request for what you call royalty, that is in every extraction from the land. So the company will be paying some certain amount, so that amount is being added as part of the cost of that product. So like I said, so the royalty, the difference between royalty and rent is that royalty is based on the volume of extraction, which means if the company is not producing, they will not be incurring that expenses. I'm talking about direct expenses. So when there is no production, there is no expenses. When there is production, there will be expenses because it is directly related to the goods being produced. So that is what we call direct expenses. So that is the direct material, direct labor, direct expenses. Those are the things that form the prime cost. Now, factory overhead. If we are talking about factory overhead, we are talking about indirect expenses incurred in the production process. And these are all indirect expenses, just like I said. And they include expenses that cannot be directly traced to the goods. So without them, they are required in the production process, but they cannot be directly traced to the production of the goods. A good example of them include the wages and salaries of workers who cannot be directly traced to the manufacturing process. For example, so the packaging staff, those who are packing the goods, you can see they don't have direct contact with the production process. So it's more or less like a kind of finished product they deal with. So they are also part of the factory workers. So the stock workers, cleaners, and the likes. These are the people that comes under the overhead cost. So the cost of rent of the factory, electricity, among other expenses, they are all regarded as in the overhead cost. And also the depreciation of land and machinery. So we have work in progress. If you are talking about work in progress, we are talking about those material, the partly finished good, that is the items that cannot be categorized as raw materials or finished good, which means they have undergone the materials that have undergone the production process, but has not completed that process. So we cannot categorize them as finished good. They are not raw material. They are in between. So these are what we call work in progress. That is, cannot be categorized as materials nor complete projects. And it includes processed material that has not been passed through all the stages of production, just like I explained earlier. So this material we are talking about can be classified into two. We have open work in progress and we have closing work in progress. What is the big difference between the two? If you are talking about open work in progress, we are talking about amount of partly finished goods that are available at the beginning of financial year. That is on the 1st of January. The business wants to start operation for the year. So the number of semi-finished goods that are in the store, so those ones will be regarded as open work in progress. So it's time open work in progress. So if you're not talking about closing work in progress, so this is the amount of partly finished goods available at the end of the year. 31st of December, let's take for example, the company want to close operation for the year. The amount of semi-finished goods that are available at that time is what we regarded as closing work in progress. So now, cost of production. If you are now talking about cost of production, the cost of production include prime cost. Just like I said, if you remember, I said prime cost include direct materials, direct labor, direct expenses. If we had everything together, then we had factory overhead costs, which are indirect expenses in the production process. Then we had net work in progress. What I call net work in progress is that the open work in progress will not subtract the closing work in progress inside. So whatever we have left is called net work in progress. And this will be added to prime cost and factory overhead to get our cost of production. So now let's look at the key terms in the preparation of manufacturing account. So the first one is open stock. If you are talking about open stock of raw materials, you are talking about the amount of raw materials that is available at the beginning of the year. On the 1st of January, when the company opened, the number of materials that are available at that time are called open stock of raw materials. That is, this is the cost of raw materials available at the beginning of the financial period. So immediately they take the stock. Then the next thing is to buy more materials because the materials in the stock cannot be enough. So that is, we have purchase of raw materials. So any material that is being purchased during the year is categorized as purchased of raw materials, and this is the amount of raw materials purchased during the financial year. So when we go to the market, we purchase item, the items will not transfer itself to the factory. That means we have to move the item through transportation, the people will load the items. All those expenses are called carriage inward. So the carriage inward of raw materials will also form part of the cost of the material. So carriage inward of raw materials, so this includes all expenses in getting the purchased materials to the factory. When we get the purchased material to the factory, then the next thing is to put everything in the factory. Maybe on that process, we now realize that there are some defects. Maybe some of the products, some of the materials being bought maybe are expired. So the factory will not take the responsibility. Then the next thing for them is to do what? To return it back to the supplier. So that's the reason why we have return outward. All those return are referred to as return outward. So return outwards of raw materials. So this is the cost of raw materials returned by the factory due to some defect, just like I said, maybe expired or damage on transit back to the supplier. So if we remove the amount of return outwards, then the next one you have is cost of raw materials available. That is the total amount of raw materials that we now have available and stored. So that is, this refers to the cost of raw materials available for use in the production process. So from these materials, they will start producing. So at the end of the year, when the business is closing up, they want to know the number of raw materials that are left in the store, and this is called closing stock of raw materials. That's the reason why we said this is the amount of raw materials remain in the factory at the end of the financial year. If we remove the amount of closing stock of raw materials from cost of raw materials available, in that case, what we are going to have is what we call cost of raw materials used. That is the amount of raw materials actually used during that year for production. So this is the total cost of raw materials used in the production process. Then the next thing is to add direct labor. So just like I said, direct wages. So all those wages that directly related to the production manufacturing process, so we had them. We had direct expenses. So just like I said, if you are talking about direct expenses, so these are expenses that are directly related to the goods being manufactured, and they varies with the level of the output. Just like I explained earlier, that is, if there is production, these expenses will occur. If production increases, the expenses will increase. The amount of the expenses will increase. If production decreases, the amount of the expenses will decrease. And when there is no production, that means there won't be expenses in this category. In the case of direct expenses. So now we have factory overhead. If you are talking about factory overhead, we are talking about all those indirect expenses. That is, these are indirect expenses made in the manufacturing of goods. Just like I explained earlier, rent, depreciation of plant and machinery, electricity, and the like, they are all indirect expenses. They also form part of the cost of production. So which means all these expenses will come under factory overhead. So then the next thing is work in progress. I explain what work in progress is. That is partly the semi-finished good. We had opening work in progress, then we subtract closing work in progress. Then by the time we had everything together, what we have is what we call cost of production. That is cost of producing, cost of manufacturing the goods. So now, if you are now talking about cost of production, it comprises direct material. Just like I explained, direct material include all the material purchased. We have direct labor, which is direct labor. Example is wages. You have direct expenses. So direct material, direct labor, direct expenses, just like I said, this is called prime cost. So the three of them are known as prime cost. So by the time we now had factory overhead and work in progress to prime cost, so what we are now having in that case is what we call cost of production. That is the cost of producing the goods, the cost of manufacturing the goods. So, but in some cases, the business will now compare the goods that are being produced. They will look at the price. How much are they selling these goods at the market? That amount is what we call the market value. So this is the amount that will be required to buy equivalent goods produced in the market. Let's take, for example, the total cost of production is 1.5 million, that is 1,500,000. Then the business go to the market and they value the item. They realize that to buy that same amount of product, it will cost them 1.8 million naira. We can see, which means the business has saved 300,000 naira in that process. So that difference is called what they call manufacturing profit. That is when there is profit, when business make profit in producing instead of buying. So that's the reason why we said manufacturing profit is the amount saving by a company for manufacturing its product instead of buying them. So that is what manufacturing profit is. So if there is any question, so let me know. Before I round up, let me quickly go into the format of preparing manufacturing account. So you have your heading manufacturing account for the year ended, that is 1st December year. So it may be December. So whatever year you are given. So then the next thing is to put your unit of measurement, like this one naira. Then, like I explained, the first thing, open stock of raw materials. That's the first step. When any firm, any manufacturing company open, the first thing is to know the total number of raw materials they have in stock. That's opening stock of raw material. Then the next thing is to buy more, purchase of raw materials. So we had purchase of raw material. So the cost of transporting those raw material to the factory, that's carriage inward of raw material, that will also be added. Then after adding it, they will now look at it. If there is any defect, they will return any damaged goods back to them. So that we call return outward. That means we are going to deduct the amount from what we buy. So let's return outward of raw materials. By the time we deduct return outward of raw material, whatever amount that is left means total amount we spend on purchases, and that will be added to what we have in the store before, which is the opening stock. If we add everything together, so what we call that is cost of raw materials available in the store. So at the end of the period, the materials left, which is closing stock of raw materials, we remove it from the total materials available. If we remove that, so whatever we have as the balance, that will be the cost of raw materials used for production process. So then the next thing is to now add other expenses, which are direct labor. So like manufacturing wages, direct expenses. If you are given, we had direct expenses. Just like I said, royalty is an example of direct expenses. And if it is stated direct expenses, you just add it like that. So we had everything together. Whatever balance we have, that's what we call prime cost. And that is our prime cost. So then the next thing is factory overhead. So let's have our factory overhead. So like I said, these are all indirect expenses. Then we bring all the factory overhead we have in the question. For example, depreciation of plant and machinery, factory foreman is an overhead expenses, factory power, factory rent and rates. So, and the last, if you address other expenses relating to the factory, you bring everything together, then you add. When you add them together, whatever amount you have will be added to your prime cost. So then the next thing is work in progress, that is partly finished good. You take the opening work in progress, then you subtract the closing work in progress from it. If we subtract closing work in progress from opening work in progress, whatever amount we have left, the balance, that will also be added to our prime cost and factory overhead cost. So now if we now add everything together, we close the account, we add everything together. So whatever amount we have is what they call cost of production or cost of manufacturing the goods. So that is how to prepare a manufacturing account. And take note, this is the complete format of preparing a manufacturing account. And any student who wants to prepare manufacturing account, these are the information you should think of, you should look up. You may not have the full information, so whatever one you have, then you bring everything together. So thank you very much for watching the video. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like the video, and share it with others. So until the next lesson, where I will be taking the final account, that is trading. Okay, the next lesson, just like I said, the second part of this